Have you ever tried to learn something new, only to find yourself constantly distracted? You sit down to study programming, open your laptop, and suddenly, an hour has vanished, lost to notifications, videos, or endless scrolling through social media. You start a coding tutorial, but your mind drifts to messages, news, or a random thought. It's frustrating, isn't it? You begin to wonder if you just aren't capable, if maybe you're lazy, or if you'll never level up in life. Here's the truth. It's not about being lazy or lacking talent. Our modern world is designed to fragment attention. Every ping, every alert, every post competes for your brain's focus. Studies show it can take more than 20 minutes to regain concentration after a single distraction. Multiply that by how often you check your phone or multitask throughout the day, and it's no wonder learning new skills feels impossible. But what if there was a way to break free? To train your mind to focus so deeply that time slows down and your work becomes effortless? This isn't some gimmick or marketing hack. It's a practice that has existed for centuries. Marco, a delivery rider stuck in a low-paying, exhausting job, discovered this secret. One evening, a calm, older customer introduced him to a simple focus ritual inspired by Japanese Zen, Ichigyo-Zammai. One task, complete attention to by applying short, structured focus sessions, keeping distractions out of reach, and building a nightly learning ritual. Marco went from failing at every coding course to completing projects, building a portfolio, and landing his first software engineering role. His life changed not because he was naturally gifted, but because he mastered his attention. If you feel stuck in your own distractions, take a moment to reflect. What steals your attention the most? Your phone? Social media? Your wandering mind? Comment below and share. Because the first step to transforming your life, like Marco did, starts with noticing where your focus is and learning how to reclaim it. The story of Marco. Marco wiped the sweat off his forehead as he leaned against his motorcycle, watching the late afternoon traffic crawl through the narrow streets. Another delivery completed, another $5 tip, or sometimes none at all. His backpack felt heavier than usual, weighed down not just by the food he carried, but by the relentless thought that his life was stuck in an endless loop of work, exhaustion, and unfulfilled dreams. He had wanted more than this. He had always dreamed of sitting behind a desk, writing code, building apps, and creating things that mattered. But every night, by the time he reached home, his brain felt like mush, and he found himself scrolling endlessly through his phone, losing hours to YouTube videos, memes, and notifications. IT wasn't laziness. He wasn't stupid. Deep down, he knew he had potential. But every attempt to study programming ended the same way. A half-finished course, a browser full of tabs, notes scattered across apps, and a growing sense of failure gnawing at him. Each unfinished tutorial felt like another chain locking him into the same life he was desperate to escape. He had tried everything, or so he thought. He tried learning in the mornings before work, but the rush to start deliveries left him distracted. He tried late nights, but his body was too tired, his eyelids too heavy. He bought new headphones, installed productivity apps, even made charts to track his progress. Nothing worked. Every plan collapsed under the weight of notifications, messages, and the chaos of his own scattered mind. One rainy evening, after delivering a steaming bowl of ramen to a modest apartment in the quieter part of town, he found himself lingering. Mr. Reyes, an older man in his late 40s with calm eyes and a faint smile, opened the door and invited him inside. "You look tired," he said simply, handing Marco a small towel. Marco shrugged, unsure why he felt comfortable spilling words to a stranger. "It's just, I try to study coding, but I can't focus. I start courses, then I get distracted. I feel like I'm failing at everything." His voice dropped, almost a whisper at Mr. Reyes nodded slowly. "You're not failing because you're lazy or incapable. You're failing because your mind is fragmented. You've been trained to split your attention, not focus it. But there's a way to change that." He led Marco to a small study corner in his apartment, a desk organized with only a laptop, a notebook, and a cup of tea. "There's a Japanese technique called Ichigyo-Zammai," Mr. Reyes explained. "It means, one task, full attention. When you truly focus on one thing at a time, the mind learns to work deeply without distraction. Marco listened, intrigued but skeptical. Just focus. Yes, Mr. Reyes said. But it's more than that. You need a ritual, a system. 25-minute blocks of pure focus, no phone, no tabs, no interruptions. Short resets in between. A nightly routine that primes your mind before study. And when your mind wanders, as it will, you bring it back gently, without judgment. He showed Marco his own setup. A clean desk, a single browser tab open for tutorials, timer ticking softly, and a notebook where he wrote down progress after each session. The room radiated calm. Marco had never seen such order, such quiet efficiency that night. Back in his small rented room, Marco tried it. He put his phone in another room, closed every other tab, and set a timer for 25 minutes. At first, his mind fought him, tugging at memories, notifications, and worries. But he breathed, brought his attention back, and kept typing. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt flow. He was not just learning. He was thinking, understanding, creating. Days passed, and Marco built the ritual into his life. Even after long deliveries, he would come home, make tea, and sit at his small desk. 25 minutes, reset, another 25 minutes. Tutorials, coding exercises, documentation. Nothing escaped his attention. Slowly, he noticed a change. He could study longer without exhaustion, retain more knowledge, and even solve problems he had once thought impossible. One night, after finishing a coding challenge, Marco leaned back at his chair, eyes wide. The lines of code in front of him worked perfectly. For the first time, he realized, I can do this. I'm finally in control. That feeling, confidence, clarity, purpose, was intoxicating. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Marco had experienced before. Each day, he rode his motorcycle through the city streets, carrying food to customers, yet now there was a quiet excitement humming under his exhaustion. Work was still hard, sometimes grueling, but he no longer felt like a prisoner to the routine. After each delivery, he returned to his small room, set up his ritual, and focused with a single-minded determination that surprised even himself. He noticed subtle changes almost immediately. Small coding exercises he used to abandon midway were now completed. Functions that had seemed incomprehensible began to make sense. The first time he managed to build a simple calculator app, he leaned back in his chair, laughing softly. I did that, he whispered. I actually did that. It was a small victory, but to Marco, it felt monumental. For the first time, he tasted what success felt like when it came from effort and discipline, not luck or innate talent. The Ichigyo-Zammai technique became his anchor. He started keeping a small notebook, noting the start and finish of each focus session. He tracked his mistakes and reflected on what pulled his attention away. Slowly, he built a rhythm. 25 minutes of undistracted work, 5 minutes to stretch or make tea, repeat. The discipline, once alien to him, became natural. Even on days when deliveries ran late or fatigue clung to him like a shadow, the ritual held firm. Marco also discovered surprising side effect. His mind felt lighter outside study hours. He stopped endlessly scrolling through social media. Conversations with friends became more present, more intentional. Even the mundane, cooking a meal, washing dishes, felt more complete because his attention was no longer fractured. He was living fully in each moment, something he had never realized he was missing. One evening, after a long day of work and study, Marco received a message in a coding forum about a mini hackathon. Hesitant at first, he decided to participate. The challenge was simple: build a weather app in 24 hours. For the first time, he didn't panic at the deadline. He divided the work into focus blocks, tackled one feature at a time, and when distractions came, as they inevitably did, he gently brought his attention back. By the time the clock struck midnight, Marco had a functioning app. Not perfect, but functional. He uploaded it to the forum and went to bed, a quiet thrill in his chest. The comments the next morning were encouraging. "Nice work for your first project." "Well done. Keep going, you'll improve fast." Marco grinned. For the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider peeking into a world he couldn't reach. He was in it, motivated. He built more small apps. A to-do list, a currency converter, a notes manager. Each project taught him something new. Debugging no longer frustrated him. It became a puzzle, a challenge to his growing patience and focus. Slowly, the portfolio that had once existed only in his imagination began to take tangible shape. Marco began to realize the barrier wasn't his skill, but his mind. Once he learned to focus, the skill followed naturally at work. His colleagues began noticing subtle changes too. He was calmer, more deliberate in his actions, more organized. Even the customers who received his deliveries commented on his steadier demeanor. Marco smiled at these observations quietly. The world hadn't changed, he had. His weapon was no longer the speed of his delivery, but the mastery of his own attention. Then came the night that would mark a turning point. Marco set out to tackle a complex coding challenge he had once avoided. A dynamic web page with interactive elements, APIs, and data handling. He set his phone aside, closed all distractions, and started. 25 minutes in, he felt the familiar tug of wandering thoughts, but he gently redirected himself. Hours passed. The outside world melted away. Marco typed, tested, debugged, and iterated. By dawn, he leaned back and exhaled deeply. The challenge was complete, functioning perfectly. He stared at the screen, heart racing. A thought, simple and yet profound, bubbled up. I can do this. I am capable. I am in control. For the first time, Marco believed in himself, not just his dream, but his ability to achieve it. With each completed project, Marco's confidence grew, but so did his awareness of what was at stake. Every day he lingered in delivery work without progress. He felt his dreams slipping further away. His body ached from long hours on the road, and every delay or low tip reminded him of the fragile balance between survival and ambition. Now, however, he had a secret weapon. Focused, he began preparing seriously for job applications. Resumes were rewritten to highlight his coding projects. He built a small portfolio website, showcasing the apps he had painstakingly developed during late-night focus sessions. Each line of code carried the sweat and persistence of months of disciplined work. The apps weren't flashy, but they worked, and that mattered. Applications went out, one after another. Rejections arrived too. Standard, "We appreciate your time" emails, but Marco no longer crumbled under them. He had learned to separate emotion from action. He treated each rejection as data, a chance to improve, to tweak his resume, to refine his portfolio. Slowly, he felt the invisible tide turning point one afternoon. After a grueling set of deliveries and heavy rain, Marco returned home to find an email that made him freeze. A tech company, mid-sized but reputable, wanted him for an interview. He reread the email several times, disbelief and excitement battling inside him. The opportunity he had dreamed about, the chance to escape the endless cycle of deliveries, had arrived. Preparation became ritualized, like his coding practice. He researched common interview questions, brushed up on algorithms, and rehearsed explaining his projects with clarity. The night before the interview, he set aside all distractions, practiced a final focus session, and went to bed feeling ready. For the first time in his life, he wasn't anxious. He was prepared. The interview day was intense. Technical questions, problem-solving exercises, and behavioral discussions tested everything he had learned. At one point, a challenging coding problem made him pause. In the past, he would have panicked, letting his mind spiral into self-doubt. But now he breathed, refocused, and attacked the problem with the same single-minded attention he had honed through Ichigyo-Zammai. Within minutes, the solution appeared, clean and elegant. When the interview concluded, Marco stepped out into the sunlight, a quiet smile forming. He hadn't just answered questions. He had demonstrated his ability to focus under pressure, to solve problems methodically, and to learn continuously. That night, he allowed himself a rare moment of hope. Days later, the call came. "We'd like to offer you the junior developer position," said the voice on the other end. Marco's hands trembled slightly as he held the phone. Months of relentless practice, struggle, and discipline had culminated in this moment. He wasn't special because he had a genius IQ or some hidden talent. He was special because he had mastered his mind. Life didn't suddenly become easy. The transition to full-time software development brought new challenges, deadlines, collaborative work, and learning unfamiliar frameworks. But Marco approached each task with the same focused discipline he had cultivated. The sense of control he now possessed transformed frustration into problem-solving, exhaustion into sustainable effort. He no longer feared obstacles. He saw them as steps in a process he had already proven he could master at home. He often thought about the other delivery riders he had worked alongside, friends who were still trapped in the endless loop of deliveries, fatigue, and distraction. Marco began sharing what he had learned, small techniques, focus rituals, and the philosophy that attention is a skill, not a trait. His story spread quietly but powerfully, proof that mastery over one's mind could change life's circumstances in ways talent alone never could. Marco's first weeks at the tech company were both thrilling and humbling. Every task, every pull request, every line of code reminded him how far he had come, and how far he still had to go. Yet, unlike before, he no longer felt powerless. The rhythm he had built, the nightly focus rituals, the one-task-at-a-time discipline, was his anchor. When he faced complex bugs or unfamiliar frameworks, he returned to his attention-first method. Slowly, problems unraveled, and his confidence solidified. One late evening, as he debugged a stubborn piece of code, he realized something profound. The same discipline that had turned him into a competent developer had already transformed him in ways far beyond coding. He was calmer, more intentional, and more resilient. Failures no longer crushed him. They taught him. Distractions no longer controlled him. He guided his attention. And most importantly, he finally believed he could shape his own life. The turning point came when his team lead asked him to present a small project to the group. Normally, public speaking or performance pressure would have terrified him, but Marco approached it with the same mindset he had cultivated in his personal practice. Focus on the task, block out distractions, and give full attention to the moment. The presentation went flawlessly. His work was praised, and colleagues asked questions about his approach. Marco smiled quietly. He realized this was more than coding. It was mastery over his mind. Months later, his family noticed the changes too. The worn-out, exhausted delivery rider had transformed into someone calm, confident, and capable. He could now support them in ways he had only dreamed of. Yet, Marco never forgot the lessons from his early struggles. Every evening, he returned to his focus ritual, not because he needed to, but because it had become part of who he was. He also began mentoring others quietly. Delivery riders, friends, or anyone stuck in repetitive routines who confessed their frustration and distraction became his students. He taught them simple methods, one task, full attention, 25-minute focus blocks, small rituals before learning. He didn't promise instant success, only the power of attention, a skill anyone could build. One day, as he walked past the same streets he had once delivered through, Marco realized something important. His life didn't change because he was smarter, luckier, or more talented than anyone else. It changed because he had learned to focus, to control the one thing that truly determined outcomes. His mind paused, looking at the sunset reflecting off the city's buildings, and smiled. The road ahead was still long, full of challenges and unknowns, but he was ready, because for the first time, Marco knew the most valuable tool he had was not his motorcycle, his laptop, or even his coding skills. It was his attention, and in that quiet certainty, he finally felt free.